You think you're better than us just because you made it out? My sister yelled across the table. Dad stayed quiet. Mom looked away, like they all agreed. I just smirked, pulled out my keys and said, better? No. Smarter? Maybe. They all laughed until they saw the logo of my new $700,000 car sitting outside. I, 32M, finally made it out and my family hated me for it. The smell of burnt toast and stale coffee hit me the second I walked through the door. Nothing had changed. Same peeling wallpaper. Same water-stained ceiling. Same broken promises hanging in the air like cigarette smoke. I'd been gone for 8 years, and it looked like time had just given up on this place entirely. My sister was the first to notice me standing in the doorway. Her eyes went wide for a second, before her face twisted into something between shock and disgust. She didn't get up, didn't smile, just stared like I was some kind of ghost that should have stayed buried. Mom was at the stove, her back to me, shoulders hunched in that defeated way I remembered too well. Dad sat at the kitchen table with his hands wrapped around a mug, staring at nothing. The television was on in the living room, some talk show bleeding through the walls. Everything felt smaller than I remembered. Suffocating. I cleared my throat. Mom turned around slowly. And for just a moment, maybe half a second, I saw something soft in her eyes. Then it was gone. Replaced by that familiar blank expression that meant she'd already decided not to care. She asked me what I was doing there. Not, how are you or we missed you. Just what was I doing there? I told her I was in town for a business meeting and thought I'd stop by. Thought maybe we could talk. Maybe clear the air after all these years. My sister laughed. It was sharp and mean, the kind of laugh that's designed to cut. She asked if I was serious. If I actually thought I could just walk back in here like nothing happened. Like I hadn't abandoned them, left them to rot while I went off to play big shot. I felt my jaw tighten. This was already going exactly how I'd expected, but somehow it still stung. Dad finally looked up at me. His face was harder than I remembered. More lines, more anger baked into every crease. He asked me what I wanted. Said I must want something if I bothered showing up after 8 years of silence. I wanted to tell him I'd called. I'd sent letters at first. I tried to reach out. But they'd made it clear I wasn't welcome unless I came crawling back, broken, ready to admit I'd been stupid for leaving. Ready to admit that trying to be better than this was arrogant and selfish. Instead, I just said I wanted to see them. That was it. My sister scoffed and said I wanted to see them so I could feel good about myself. So I could look down at them from whatever high horse I'd climbed onto and feel superior. She said I always thought I was better than everyone, even when we were kids. Always reading those books, always talking about getting out, going to college, making something of myself. Like this town, this family, wasn't good enough for me. I told her that wasn't true. I'd never thought I was better. I just wanted different. Mom finally spoke. She said different meant I thought something was wrong with them. With the life they built. She said I'd always been ungrateful. They'd fed me, clothed me, kept a roof over my head, and I'd repaid them by leaving the second I turned 18. By acting like they were some kind of burden I needed to escape. The room felt like it was shrinking. I could feel the walls pressing in, the same way they had when I was 17 and lying awake at night, counting down the days until I could leave. Until I could breathe. I sat down at the table even though no one invited me to. Dad's eyes narrowed, but he didn't say anything. I asked them if they remembered the last conversation we'd had before I left. The one where I told them I'd gotten a full scholarship to a university 3 states away. The one where Dad told me I was wasting my time. That college was for rich kids and dreamers, and I was neither. That I'd flunk out within a year and come crawling back, broke and humiliated. Mom had agreed with him. Said I should stay, get a job at the plant like Dad, like my uncle, like every man in this family for 2 generations. Said that was real work. Honest work. Not like whatever I thought I was going to do with some fancy degree. My sister had been 16 then. She called me selfish. Said I was abandoning her. That I didn't care about family. I looked at them now, all 3 of them watching me with those same suspicious, resentful eyes, and I asked them what they wanted me to say. That they were right? That I should have stayed and worked myself into an early grave like Dad? That I should have settled for this? My sister slammed her hand on the table. She said there was that word again. Settled. Like their lives were something to settle for. Like they were beneath me. I told her she was twisting my words. She said I was twisting reality. That I'd rewritten history in my head to make myself the victim, the misunderstood genius who escaped the ignorant masses. But the truth was, I'd just been selfish. I'd taken everything they'd given me and used it to run away. And now I had the audacity to come back and act like I'd done something noble. Dad asked me what I did for work. His tone was cold, clinical, like he was trying to catch me in a lie. I told him I was in finance, private equity. I'd started at a firm right out of college, worked my way up, and eventually started my own company 3 years ago. He asked if I was rich then. Said it with a sneer, like the word tasted bad in his mouth. I hesitated. I didn't want to lie, but I knew the truth would only make things worse. I told him I was comfortable, that I'd done well for myself. My sister laughed again, louder this time. She said comfortable was code for rich. She said I probably had some big house in the city, some perfect life with perfect people who didn't remind me where I came from. She asked if I was embarrassed by them, if I'd ever mentioned them to my friends, my colleagues, if anyone in my new life even knew I had a family. The truth was, I didn't talk about them. Not because I was embarrassed, but because every time I tried, it hurt. It reminded me that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had only ever loved the version of me that stayed small, that didn't ask questions, that didn't want more. I told her it wasn't like that. But even as I said it, I knew she wouldn't believe me. Mom sat down at the table. She looked tired. Older than she should have. She said she didn't understand why I was really there. That if I just wanted to see them, I could have called. Could have warned them. Could have given them time to prepare instead of just showing up like some kind of surprise inspection. I told her I didn't think they'd answer if I called. She didn't deny it. There was a long silence. The kind that's heavy and suffocating, filled with all the things no one wants to say but everyone's thinking. Then my sister broke it. She asked if I thought I was better than them just because I made it out. Her voice was loud, almost shaking. She said I could pretend all I wanted, act all humble and misunderstood, but she could see it in my eyes. The way I looked at this house. At them. Like we were some kind of cautionary tale. Some before picture in my success story. Dad stayed quiet. Mom looked away, and I realized they agreed with her. All of them. They'd convinced themselves that my success was an insult, that my escape was abandonment, that my refusal to drown with them was arrogance. I felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger exactly. More like clarity. I leaned back in my chair and told them they were right about one thing. I did think I was smarter than them. Not better. Not superior. Just smarter. Because I'd figured out something they never would. That staying in a place that suffocates you out of loyalty or guilt or fear isn't noble. It's just slow suicide. I stood up, pulled my keys from my pocket and set them on the table. The key fob was sleek, black, unmistakable. The logo gleamed, even in the dim kitchen light. My sister stared at it, then at me. She asked what that was. I told her it was my car, the one parked outside. She got up and walked to the window. I heard her breath catch, heard her whisper something under her breath. Dad and Mom followed. They all stood there, staring out at the street, at the machine sitting there like some alien artifact. It was a limited edition, custom paint, worth more than this house, more than every car on this street combined. My sister turned around slowly. Her face was pale. She asked how much it cost. I told her $700,000, give or take. The room went silent. Dad's face twisted into something ugly. He said I came there to rub it in their faces, to show off, to prove I was better than them. I told him I came because I'd hoped, maybe stupidly, that enough time had passed. That maybe they'd be happy for me. Proud even. But I should have known better. Mom finally spoke. She said I'd changed. That I wasn't the same person who'd left. She said money had made me cold. I told her she was wrong. I was exactly the same person. The one who'd begged them to believe in me, to support me, to just let me try. The one they'd told would fail. The one they'd resented for refusing to fail. I picked up my keys and headed for the door. My sister called after me, said I couldn't just leave. Not again. I turned around and looked at her, really looked at her. She was 30 now, still living in this house, still working the same dead-end job she had since high school, still blaming everyone else for her unhappiness. I told her she was right. I couldn't just leave, because I'd already left, 8 years ago. This wasn't me leaving. This was me confirming that leaving was the best decision I'd ever made. I walked out and didn't look back. Update 1. I didn't expect the story to end there, but I should have known my family wouldn't let it go. 2 days after I visited, my phone started blowing up. Texts from my sister, calls from my mom, even a voicemail from Dad, which was shocking considering he'd rather eat glass than admit he wanted something from me. I ignored them at first. I was busy with work, and honestly I didn't have the emotional bandwidth to deal with their drama. But the messages kept coming. My sister's texts went from angry to desperate. She said we needed to talk. That it wasn't fair for me to just show up, flex my success, and disappear. that I owed them a real conversation. I laughed when I read that. I owed them. But curiosity got the better of me. I called her back. She sounded different on the phone, less hostile, almost nervous. She said she'd been thinking about what I said, about being smarter, not better. She said maybe I had a point, that maybe she'd been too harsh. I didn't believe her for a second, but I let her talk. She said Mom and Dad were struggling, that Dad had been laid off 6 months ago, that Mom's hours had been cut at work, that they were behind on the mortgage and didn't know how they were going to make it through the winter. And there it was, the real reason for the sudden change in tone. She didn't ask directly, she was too proud for that. But the implication was clear, they needed money, and I had it. I asked her why she thought I'd helped them. After everything they'd said to me, after the way they'd treated me my entire life, after they'd made it crystal clear that my success was an insult to them. She went quiet for a moment. Then she said family was supposed to help family, that no matter what had happened in the past, we were still blood. I told her blood didn't mean much when it was only brought up when someone needed something. She got defensive. Said I was being cruel, that I'd changed, that the old me would have cared. I told her the old me had cared. Too much, and it had nearly destroyed me. I hung up. But the calls didn't stop. Mom left a voicemail. She cried, said she didn't know what they were going to do, that they might lose the house, that she was scared. It was manipulative, I knew that. But part of me still felt guilty. That's the thing about family trauma. It doesn't just go away because you leave. It follows you, whispers in your ear, tells you that maybe you are the bad guy. Maybe you are selfish. Maybe you do owe them. I thought about it for a week. Really thought about it, and then I made a decision. I called my sister back, told her I'd help, but on my terms. I offered to pay off the mortgage, completely. They'd own the house outright, no more payments, no more stress. She was ecstatic, started thanking me, crying, saying she knew I'd come through, that deep down I was still a good person. I cut her off. I told her there was a condition. They had to sit down with me. All 3 of them. And they had to listen. Really listen. To everything I had to say. No interruptions, no arguments. And if they could do that, if they could hear me out and actually acknowledge what they'd put me through, I'd pay off the house. She agreed immediately. Said they'd do anything. Update 2. We met at a diner halfway between my hotel and their house. Neutral ground. I got there early, ordered coffee, and waited. They showed up together. Mom looked anxious. Dad looked angry, like he was being forced to attend a hostage negotiation. My sister looked hopeful, like she thought this was going to be some emotional reunion, where we all hugged and cried and everything was magically fixed. They sat down. I didn't waste time on pleasantries. I told them I'd kept my end of the bargain. I was there. I was ready to help. But first, they needed to listen. I started from the beginning, from childhood. I reminded them of every time I'd been told I was too ambitious, too different, too much. I reminded Dad of the time I won a state writing competition, and he told me it didn't matter because writing wasn't a real skill. I reminded Mom of the time I asked her to come to my high school graduation, and she said she had to work, even though I later found out she'd taken the day off to go shopping with my aunt. I reminded my sister of the time she told her friends I was a freak because I spent my weekends reading instead of partying. I told them about the nights I'd cried myself to sleep because I felt like I was suffocating. About how I'd worked 3 jobs in college just to make sure I never had to come back. About how every success I'd achieved felt hollow because the people who were supposed to be proud of me had only ever seen it as a betrayal. Mom started crying halfway through. My sister looked uncomfortable. Dad just stared at the table. I told them I didn't hate them. I didn't even resent them anymore. But I needed them to understand that their love had always come with conditions. And the condition was that I had to stay small, stay struggling, stay stuck. Because my success made them feel like failures. I asked them if they could acknowledge that, if they could admit, just once, that they'd been wrong. The silence was deafening. Finally, Dad spoke. He said I was making them out to be villains, that they'd done the best they could, that they'd never asked me to leave. That was my choice. I told him he was right. It was my choice. The best one I ever made. Mom wiped her eyes and said she was sorry. That she didn't know I'd felt that way. That she'd only wanted me to be realistic, to not get my hopes up and get hurt. I told her that fear wasn't protection, it was just fear. My sister said I was being unfair, that I was holding grudges, that I needed to let it go. I leaned back and looked at all 3 of them. I told them I'd already let it go, years ago. I'd built a life without them, a good life. And I didn't need their approval anymore. But I'd come back one last time, hoping they could at least be honest. that they could own their part in why we'd grown apart. None of them could. I stood up, left an envelope on the table, and walked out. Inside was a check for $50,000, enough to catch them up on the mortgage and give them a buffer, but not enough to pay it off. I texted my sister later that night, told her that was all they were getting, that if they wanted more, they could do what I did, work for it. She called me every name in the book. I blocked her number. Update 3. It's been 3 months since I walked out of that diner. I haven't heard from any of them since I blocked my sister, and I don't expect to. I thought I'd feel worse about it, guilt, regret, something, but mostly I just feel free. I threw myself into work. Closed a deal I'd been chasing for over a year, bought a second property, started mentoring a kid from a rough background who reminded me of myself at that age. Life kept moving forward, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. Then last week, I got a letter in the mail. Handwritten, my sister's handwriting. I almost threw it away without opening it, but something made me stop. Inside was a single page. No apology, no sob story, just a few lines. She told me they'd lost the house anyway, that $50,000 wasn't enough. That Dad's pride wouldn't let him take a job he thought was beneath him, and Mom couldn't work enough hours to cover everything. They were moving in with our aunt, the one who'd always looked down on me too. She said I must be happy, that I'd finally gotten my revenge. I read it twice, then put it in the shredder. She was wrong. This wasn't revenge. Revenge would have been showing up at the foreclosure sale and buying the house myself just to prove a point. Revenge would have been rubbing their faces in it. This was just consequences. The same consequences I would have faced if I'd listened to them. If I'd stayed. If I'd let their fear and bitterness define my life. I'd given them a chance, more than one. And they'd chosen pride over humility. Blame over accountability. Comfort over change. That wasn't on me. I'm done carrying their weight. Done trying to prove I'm worthy of love I was never going to receive. Done letting their voices in my head tell me I'm selfish for choosing myself. I made it out, and I'm not going back. Not for anyone.